Hi, this is Russ with Devoted Golfer TV. I'm here with Ridge Meracle, and Ridge is the Texas.
I'm the North Texas and Oklahoma Territory Manager for Mizuno Golf.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, sir.
And so we were talking a little bit earlier about your background. You've been in this business your whole life, right?
Oh, absolutely. You know, my dad started in this industry back in 1984 as a warehouse guy for Nevada Bobs.
Yeah.
And when I came along, I just kind of grew up in the shop. And, you know, golf always fascinated me as a kid. And by the time I was 13, he was lucky enough to go work for a major OEM doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, being a son, you just want to see what your dad does when you're growing up. That I got to go to all the demo days with him and just learn and see what he did. And by the time I was 13 years old, I was a fitter. I was fitting with him.
Were you building clubs at that point?
I wasn't building clubs yet. You know, when I was going to demo days with him, it was really just to get the static measurements.
Yeah.
But just to really, I really kind of took a really good liking to fitting and really kind of became passionate about it. And by the time I was 15, I was a certified fitter for one of the major OEMs.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And then when I was 17, I had an opportunity to run a golf shop with a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Me and him opened up a driving range when we were 17, 18. And right after that, I went to college and worked for one of the national retailers. And by the time I was 22, I was already in the industry indirectly for almost 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I took a step away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're that age, you don't want to be stuck in something your whole life. But the years I was out of the industry, I just began to miss it more than I could have imagined. And I was lucky enough to get an opportunity with Mizuno being in customer service. I took a job with them in November of 2016 and really just tried to absorb as much information as I could. When you work in customer service, it doesn't sound like the most ideal job, but it's so much fun because you're right next to the R&D guys and get to pick their brain on a day-to-day basis. You get to pick the brain of the sales team to see what they do. So you have a really good pulse on what's coming, but also understanding on the whys and hows of what we do. So I had a blast working in customer service for 2.5 years, and I've now been on the road with Mizuno for about a year now, and it's been a blast.
So there isn't going to be any excuses when I ask you to jam an order through customer service.
There shouldn't
because
be.
Because you know everybody there, right?
If it's feasible, if it's
Yeah.
doable, I can get it done. You know, right now with what's going on in the industry with the demand, there's some parameters maybe I can't get around, but absolutely there are some tricks of the trade I still got in there.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know it, Mizuno changes half of their product line every other year.
Correct.
So last year in 2019,
Yes, sir.
it was the MPs.
Correct.
This year in 2020, it's the JPX.
It's the reintroduction of the JPX. You know, every other year we do swap out our iron cycle, so each iron product is on a 2-year product cycle. JPX was the line that we brought this year, and this is our 10th year of JPX.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, back before we started with JPX, people always thought Mizuno as a blade iron company. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've heard over the years, I'm not good enough to play Mizuno.
Right.
And
yeah.
that's such a misrepresentation of the brand, because now with JPX, not only do we have one of the most complete lines in golf, we have a club that fits everybody. And the consumers now see it. We were the number 3 market share with the 919 Hot Metals, which is our Players Forgiveness iron.
Mm-hmm.
So we are slowly growing that industry and growing that reputation with Mizuno as not just a pretty iron company, but an iron for everybody.
Okay, so let's take a look at the 2020, 2021
Yeah.
JPX irons.
Let's do it.
Okay, and so I like to start at the high end, which is the tour head.
The
right here.
9121 Tour, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about this head a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell our viewers the story behind this head and what changed from last year to this year?
Sure. You know, inside we call the 921 Tour the chosen one. It's the most played iron by non-contracted players on the PGA Tour. It won more money than any other non-contracted iron on the PGA Tour. So it's kind of gotten this nickname as the chosen one. Since we began making the JPX Tour line since 2016, it's won 4 different majors. It's won multitude of tournaments all over the world. It's really been a flagship line, not only in the JPX world, but on tour as well. You know, it's going to have traditional lofts, which is going to be very similar to the MP, so you're going to have a 34-degree 7 iron.
Yeah.
One of the things that people really like about this iron is MP is a product that we're really handcuffed.
We have some MPs here.
We do.
Yeah,
we do.
yeah.
You know,
Okay,
MP.
So what's the difference here between this on this?
You know,
MP JPX.
yeah.
Give me the short story.
Yeah, so MP is very traditional. It's what everyone knows from Mizuno. Nick Faldo walking up 18 to win a British Open, he's playing MPs. Tiger Woods 97 British Open, MPs. These are something everyone knows as a classic player's iron that the best in the world always play. And when it comes to MPs, we're really kind of handcuffed on what we can do to make and improve those irons because there's so much tradition in there. There's a lot of people that don't want us to change them. So in the JPX Tour line, we've told our R&D engineers there is no more handcuffs from the MP world. I want you to make the best player's iron possible without any restrictions.
So materials, same materials?
Same
Different
materials. Same materials. You're going to have a 1025 Elite mild carbon steel. We're the only company in the golf world that has the ability to get that material. The E on the end of it telling us that it's 5 times more pure than to be a standard 1025 mild carbon steel.
Okay, so these are made with the same steel.
Yes, sir.
And,
Same exact
and
material.
what was the number again? 1025-20?
1025E.
1025E.
Yes, 1025E mild carbon steel. And they're all forged at the same forging house. Mizuno has been forging for the last 53 years out of Chuo-koyo in Hiroshima, Japan. We're one of the only OEMs who has their own forging house that they work with. We've had a handshake agreement with them for the past 52 years, and they only forge exclusively with Mizuno.
Now, what I remember was there was some boron added here.
There was never boron added to the tours. We've had boron in our wedges and in our forge line.
So there was never boron in the MP family?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. Again, with
Okay.
MPs being so handcuffed, that's one of the
Gotcha.
things they don't
Yeah,
want us
yeah.
adding to it because they're so used to that 1025 feel that
Okay.
they don't want us. None of the feedback that we got from our tour players, consumers, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So they were
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
do not change the material on that iron.
So the change that we saw last year here was the carbon underlay.
It was the
Or
copper underlay.
The copper underlay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And I have a player here that chases around those copper underlays from 1985
Oh, yeah. The
and gets them
TN87s.
refinished, yeah. And so he doesn't have to do that anymore.
No,
right? Yeah.
absolutely not. That it's a funny story behind that because the Jeff Cook, who's our tour manager, would always talk about the best feeling irons were the TN87s. It was a Tommy Nakajima 87s. It was a Japanese only model. And for anybody who's watching, if you're an MP fan, that's an MP29 in the
Okay.
American market.
Yeah.
The only difference in those two clubs was one had a layer of copper under it and one didn't. And when we did all of our extensive testing in that, we could not find any correlation between the copper. But once we tested it with consumers and with the tour players, there's something about human element in golf that you can't measure. It doesn't matter how many tests you run on it in an R&D studio. Unless you put it in a customer's hands, that's when you're really going to get the feedback. And in a blind test with over 50 people, every single person said they could feel a difference in the copper underlay and preferred the feel of it.
Okay.
So at that point, R&D had no choice but to put the copper underlay under all of our irons in the MP
Yeah.
world.
Okay, so let's set this down and
Yeah.
let's focus over here.
Sure.
Okay, so you say the handcuffs came off. What did that mean here?
So there's a few things that we're able to do. One of the first things you'll notice about this, just from aesthetics point of view, you have that matte satin finish. You have a more brushed satin look. That's something that most of the MP world, they wouldn't want. So giving that little matte finish just gives it a little better look and a lot more extensive perimeter weighting. If you look in this club compared to most players' irons, there's a very good stability frame in there to make sure that we get a little bit better forgiveness on mishits. Of course, that's going to increase the MOI, but one of my favorite parts of this iron is the fact that we took a little bit of the weighting out of the toe. And one of the reasons
Over the last version.
over the last line, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
You-
Okay.
When you make a club like this, as popular as it is, you don't want to change it too much, kind of like the MPs, because they are so popular. But there's always things that we can
Especially
tinker
when
with.
you've got how many guys on tour playing it?
Unofficially or officially?
Unofficially.
Oh, I think the last time we looked at the lineup, we had 14 guys playing Mizunos as of 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I would say more than half of them are JPX right now.
they're playing this head.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. You're seeing more and more guys go to more of a slightly more forgiving head than a blade, because if we can make them the same size, why wouldn't you want the extra forgiveness?
Right, yeah. So it's it's kind of a cavity back in
It
a
is.
sense.
It
you know,
is.
So you've taken and moved some metal around, and it still looks like a blade,
It is.
but, there's some cavity characteristics in it.
And it's still traditionally lofted. And that's one of the things that we wanted to make sure of. It's going to have the same loft setup as the MP line.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a 34-degree 7-iron, which is what in the Mizuno world will be called traditional lofts.
Okay.
We have traditional and then what we have is modern lofts. The majority of JPX will be a modern loft.
Yeah.
Where the 921 Tours, we made sure to make the traditional lofts because those tour guys, they can hit it a ton already. They don't need the extra distance.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that these were built to the same parameters that they're accustomed to.
And so what do we have here? We have 3 through pitch,
They're 4 through gap.
4 through gap.
4 through gap. So believe it or not, we
You
brought.
know what prompted that is you talked about the tour guys hitting it so long.
Absolutely.
Right? You almost need the gap wedge to finish the set.
Oh yeah.
Because, when you start hitting 250-yard plus 4-irons, who needs a 3-iron?
Exactly. Who needs
Right?
it?
Yeah.
And we saw that.
But you have that gap at the bottom of the bag because there it is. How far are these kids hitting their pitching wedges?
Oh, it's insane. I think I saw something the other day where I saw one of the tour players. In their bag numbers, their pitching wedge going over 150 yards.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, most people nowadays, I hit my.
Well, they hit their drive so long that, they're always inside
Exactly.
of 150 yards, yeah?
They
So they
don't-
need another club.
Yeah, exactly.
So you take this down to the gap wedge, so you've got that other club in the progression.
Absolutely, and that was the goal. So, but these all stay at 46 degrees.
Yeah.
So the gap wedge in is going to be at 50 degrees. Keep that
Yeah.
4-degree gapping. But it
Yeah.
also, if you did want to go maybe to a T-series wedge, you're still going to be able to do it because the pitching wedge is at 46.
Yeah.
We want to give the customer as many options as possible to make their bag fit them.
Yeah.
In this day and age, custom building and custom fitting is so important to
Yeah.
making sure you have the right set. We want to give the customer a multitude of options. Instead of a 3-iron, you can do an HMB 3-iron,
Right.
which is our driving iron. So there's plenty of options there for that 3.
I haven't put in a lot of gap wedges, but I started doing it this year. Saying,
Yeah.
Really, you hit the ball so long, forget the 3-iron, 4-iron, right? I mean, we need more wedges.
We do.
We need a 4 or 5 wedge bag because you hit the ball so far.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to be able to just take that pitching wedge and take another step with it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're seeing more and more companies doing that. It's not just Mizuno. We know a lot of companies are going to that 4 through gap, 8-piece set versus
Yeah.
a 3-iron, 3 through pitch.
Yeah.
We're just, again, trying to give more options to the customers and really we're seeing how the industry's kind of changing a little bit.
Okay, so talking about changing, let's move along here.
Sure.
The forged.
Absolutely.
Let's take a look at that
The
one.
Forge is going to be the flagship model of this line.
Mm-hmm.
As we make new products each year, we really focus on one club that we can change the most.
Mm-hmm.
In the JPX 900, it was the introduction of the 900 Tours. In the 919s, it was the introduction of the Hot Metal Pros. Now, we didn't want to introduce another product line this year, but we haven't really had a big jump in performance of the Forge line since the JPX 850s. So we had a big challenge on our hands to make this club better than its predecessor. Mind you, the predecessor won my Golf Spy's 2019 Players Distance Award.
Oh, really?
So
Yeah.
we had a very tough challenge for us to make this club better. The first thing you're going to notice about this club is no longer going to have the boron in it that we talked about earlier. Boron was a great jump for us in the category because we can make the faces a little thinner, but we really have gotten the most out of boron in the sense of distance. So we changed this club to a 4021 chromoly. This is the first one-piece forged chromoly iron on the marketplace. What that does is we are able to make the faces a 0.5 millimeter thinner, and the way that we put the cavity in this club is actually through the sole, so the club face is parallel to the cavity. What that does is that's going to increase the core area in this club by 45%. We have a thinner top line and a
Yeah,
smaller
yeah.
sole with a core area increase of almost 50%.
Yeah.
That's unheard of.
Yeah. So what people don't understand when they see this black stripe down the face is that stripe is because you put a mill in
Absolutely.
to that hole and you mill the bottom of the face thin,
Correct.
right? And now you can fill it with black plastic or you can weld over it like
Absolutely.
Mizuno does.
Correct.
Yeah. So there is, in fact, a slot in here.
There is.
You just can't see it anymore because
Exactly.
it's been welded and filled in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do. We want to make sure that we get the right technology in there, but we don't want to make something so obvious with a plastic piece in there. You know, people have an expectation for Mizuno to look clean, look sharp.
Yeah.
So I think we did a great job of making sure to hide that where we put that cavity in.
Yeah, yeah. So for those of you that don't understand it, when you look at the back of this head, right, there's no way you get a mill in here and clean this out without going in through the bottom.
We used to do that, and most companies did, but it's impossible to get it parallel to the face. So your core area is a little
I get
cor
it.
because of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that we get more consistent ball speeds throughout the face.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, with COR, we've really been maxed out on what we can get on center hits. But if we can get closer to that number on a miss hit,
Right.
now we're talking,
So
and
we
that's our
want to
goal.
make a bigger spot in here.
Correct.
Right.
And that's what the
And
goal is
so,
with this club.
so by milling out the bottom of this, we end up increasing that spot. So those of us that have a little bit of a tendency to stand up when we swing
Absolutely.
and come in a little thin, we're going to get that kind of forgiveness off the bottom of the face.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And another thing about this club I will note, it's 1 degree stronger than the previous model. You know, as the industry's grown in the player assistance irons, we're seeing stronger and stronger lofts. The industry standard right now is 30.3 degrees. That's if we took every single 7-iron in the player assistance category and averaged it out, it's at 30.3. This one is still going to be at 31 degrees, so we're still a little weaker than the average player assistance iron. The strongest player assistance iron is 27 degrees.
Now you mentioned this is a chromalloy face.
Yep.
And it's milled thin,
Correct?
right? Does that give you a high coefficient of restitution?
Absolutely.
A lot of spring?
Absolutely. It's going to give you a little bit more spring-like effect because we are able to make that face a touch thinner.
Okay.
We've pretty much maxed out what you can get from a core area or core standpoint from that spring-like effect in that club because of how thin the face is.
So what people don't understand necessarily about core is that when you make a hot face, it launches the ball higher.
Correct.
Just naturally.
Absolutely.
It does that. So if you want to adjust your ball flight trajectory with a hot face, you have to bend them down a little bit.
Absolutely.
Right? You have to de-loft them to keep your launch angles the same.
Correct.
Now, so you get a double effect in here when you de-loft a hot face rather than having a glancing blow, which is going to take some of the energy and deflect it in this direction. When you take this and you turn it down like that, more of the energy goes into the ball because it's not as much of a deflecting shot.
Absolutely.
So you get two benefits here. Number one, hot face, which is more spring. And number two, you are getting more compression because you're de-lofting the head a little bit. But you're still getting the same launch angle. So if you want to know why that shot goes 10 yards further, it's a combination of both de-lofting to put more energy into the ball as well as a hot face.
I'm really
Did I get that right?
Oh, yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up because there's such a misconception in the industry now where consumers believe we're making clubs stronger so they go farther. That's not necessarily the case. The reasoning we're making clubs stronger is we can get the parameters of having a launch angle that's higher. Our launch angles on a 7-iron are pretty much what a launch angle of a 9-iron was 10 years ago. So if we can get the same launch characteristics, why wouldn't we make the club stronger?
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
what we're trying to do. It's not a technology in the sense of we're making clubs go farther. The technology is we're able to make the balls go higher so that we can make the loft stronger. That's going to give us a better formula, like you were saying, of getting more energy to get the ball to go farther.
I like the look of this.
Oh, it's-
Reasonably thin top line.
Very reasonably thin. We did a beveled top line. It does two things. One, it thins it out and makes it look a little better to the eye. But you don't want to go
Yep, I
too
get that.
thin.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the thinner you make a top line, actually the less feel you get. So that's one thing that we have to make sure of. You don't want to make a club too thin on that top line to really affect the feel. So we made it a little bit beveled so it kind of falls off a little bit better. And what I
Gotcha.
really like about it is it still hides the cavity of the club.
Yeah.
It looks really clean
Yeah,
in dress.
Sole width. I see a little difference there, not too much.
A little difference, not too much. Still enough to where if you wanted to combo those and maybe go long irons, 4 and 5 in that, it's not going to be too noticeable of a difference from the look of it at a dress.
And to address some of that, of course, we've got a little bevel back here. So, yeah, so we get this rearward center of gravity, but we're not taking as much turf interaction because we've beveled off the back of the head.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Let's move along here.
Sure.
Okay. Hot metal.
You know, JPX Hot Metal changed the way people see Mizuno as a company. We talked about earlier, people think Mizuno is a pretty iron company. Hot Metal, when we introduced it, changed how everyone saw Mizuno as a player's forgiveness iron as well. The Hot Metal, for example, was the #3 market share iron in golf for the past 2 years. We actually outsold year 2 on a product cycle than we did year 1. There's no company that can plan or predict that. So the demand that this club has had has been astronomical from what we expected it to be.
Now, there's 2 versions of this head.
There
right?
is 2 versions of this head. You have the Hot Metal and you're going to have the Hot Metal Pro. So Hot Metal, we really, again, another club that was a Player's Forgiveness Most Wanted Award winner by My Golf Spy. So again, we had a lot we had to do to make sure that we made this club even better than its predecessor. And one of the things we really focused on with this club is feel and sound. I think in the golf industry, sound and feel are the most important things when it comes to a golf club. And Mizuno has done a lot of research into sound and feel to make sure that clubs are getting the right frequencies of vibration. People don't realize vibration is feel. Sound is feel. So if we can get those frequencies right, we're going to get a better feeling club. A couple things we did is we added 3 new sound ribs in this club to make sure that we improve that feel even more. And we re-engineered the way that we casted these. You know, these are a one-piece cast chromoly, just like the Forge being a chromoly. This is a 4140 chromoly. And this will be our 3rd generation using it, and we've really improved the way that we cast this to make it not only more consistent, but better feeling overall.
And where is this club cast?
This club is going to be cast out in China.
Okay.
So anything forged will all be forged in Japan, and then our castings are done in China.
Okay. Which explains that this is a little more reasonably priced.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
and one of the great things I really am excited to announce is that the JPX Hot Metal line did not change in price.
Okay.
As the clubs have progressed over time, you know, in the last 3 generations, you've seen more of a price increase in clubs. The 921 Hot Metals have been the same price since the 900 inception.
Okay.
And that's something that we're wanting to continue into this line as well.
Yeah. So what do I hear when I'm looking at these 2?
Yeah.
And the Pro, what I've always liked about the Pro was that the sole width on the Pro was a little bit thinner than it was over here.
It was, yes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the goals. You know, with Hot Metal, we had so much feedback from consumers and tour players. A lot of better players wanted to play the Hot Metal because of the way it felt, the way when it came off the face, and the way it performed, that we needed to make a little bit smaller profile. So this one's going to be very similar size with a little less offset and a little thinner top line just to give us a little bit better look at a dress.
Yeah.
But they're built the same way. So
Yeah.
Hot Metals are built actually with a driver mentality. So they're built from the face back.
Okay.
They're going to have a seamless cup face, which is going to increase our ball speed a little bit more. But both technologies are in both irons.
Okay.
So just because it's a smaller club doesn't mean you're going to lose a trade-off going to the Hot Metal Pro versus Hot Metal.
Okay. So it's smaller height-wise.
Correct.
Toe to heel?
Toe to heel is about the same.
Toe to heel is about the same, yeah. That's what I thought I saw. And a slightly smaller top line.
Slightly smaller. Again, didn't want to make it too much smaller, but
Yeah.
we did want to give it a noticeable small size. But again, a great club to combo. You can make sure if you are somebody who wants maybe a smaller scoring iron in your 8-9 and pitch, the Hot Metal Pro is going to give you that ability to do it.
Okay. Okay. Where are we going next?
Let's go to the Fly High. Let's go to the direct long iron replacement. This is a club that we completely changed in the sense of our gapping, the lofts that we're using, and the way this club is engineered. As lofts are getting stronger, we talked about that earlier, the need for a club that's a direct long iron replacement that fits your gapping is very critical.
Right.
And that's something that we've been working on with the new Fly High. This is going to be something, when you look at the specs of this club, it's a little different in the sense of lofts versus length. If we took a 4-iron in both clubs, for example, the Fly High is actually 1 degree weaker than the Hot Metal 4-iron, but it's 3/4 of an inch longer.
Gotcha.
So again, we're not trying to make this
yeah.
club go farther. We're trying to make sure that we're getting the right launch characteristics to get the right gapping.
So on this picture, I'm seeing a steel shaft.
Yeah.
You have one over there.
I do.
Someplace, don't you?
I do. I have a graphite option right here.
Okay.
We wanted to make this to where it fit in your bag. So it's
Right.
going to use the same exact shafts that you used in your irons. And
That was going to be my question.
Yeah.
So I fit you for irons with a specific shaft, and I just substitute this for the long iron, same shaft.
correct. Absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
what we're trying
Or if
to
I actually know what I'm doing with shafts, I may want to go a little softer, get a little more fighting on it.
You're one of the people who know a little bit more about the average person when it comes to shafts, so there's always going to be a couple things in your fittings that are going to make it different, but I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So it's just a replacement for the long irons. And what kind of lofts do we have over here?
So the 4, for example, is going to be at 20 degrees. And they're going to,
Okay,
as it
yeah.
flows, what you'll notice it is the 4 iron looks more like a fairway wood, and the 7 looks more like a hybrid. So in its
Gotcha.
own way, it's going to
So
flow.
it's just a blended set.
Correct.
Yeah.
You know, and when you get to a 4, you need that 4 to act more as a 7 would in a sense.
Yeah.
So that 4 fly high is going to act more like a 7 would, where that 7 fly high is going to be more like a hybrid or an iron.
Okay.
These are designed to get the ball in the air, to get a better launch angle, to get us a better descent angle, also increasing the spin.
Yeah.
But we don't lose our gapping.
Yeah.
Because that's the most critical thing, I think, in a direct long iron replacement, is if you hit your 7 iron 145 yards and you get a fly high in there, we need to make sure that that club goes 145 yards. It's just easier to hit. And what's great about this club, too, we talked about the Hot Metal and Hot Metal Pro being able to combo. These are going to flow right in the hot metals, but there's no change in price. So if you're somebody who needs to go to a direct long iron replacement, we're not going to punish you by making you pay $60 to $70 more because you need that. We're making sure it fits in that set at the same
Don't
price
we have a
point.
slide that talks about that?
We do. It's
Yeah,
the hot
there
metal
it
combo.
is. Yeah,
There you go.
yeah,
So
there we
will.
go.
This will be a stock option for us. It'll go 5, 6 in the fly high, 7 through sand in the hot metals. It's going to be a combo set that you can buy directly off the rack, but they come 4 through 7, so you're able to mix and match all those clubs on your own in a custom set as well.
So I'm thinking this next slide talks about lefties.
It does.
Yeah.
You know, last
7% of the business, 7% of the market.
and it's
right?
growing. It's growing
Is it
more
really?
and more.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
it is. And you know, Mizuno, people don't realize about Mizuno's. We're a very small company. We don't have the budgets that some of these big guns have out there. We're
You're a small company in the golf business.
in the golf industry, correct?
In the sporting products world?
We're one of the biggest in the world.
Yeah.
Most people know us either from baseball, from running, but Mizuno, in the sense of the golf world, we have really grown our business significantly. And in the lefty category, they've always kind of felt left out. You know, with the MP20 line, we brought in the SEL, which is a special edition lefty. It was a 3-4 fly high, and then 3-4 HMB, and then a 5 through pitch in the MP20s. It was the most engineered set that we had for a left-handed market, and it took off. We had a lot of great success with it. And so we decided this was something that we needed to bring to the JPX line. We have never had a tour head in the JPX world for the left-handed golfer.
Right.
So this is the first time they're going to have access to it. They're going to have 4, 5 in the forged, 6 through gap in the tours.
Okay.
And just like the MP line, these are engineered so the lofts flow together. Where when we do a combo set and a right-handed set, we have to kind of get a little creative on how we bend the lofts.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have to do that with these.
Okay.
They're already flowing together.
Okay.
And so these are going to come again 4 through 5, 6 through gap in the tour.
So I'm going to have a lefty in my fitting cart.
You will, yeah.
Oh, that'll
You'll
be a
have that
good
new
thing.
7 iron,
Yeah. I won't have
absolutely.
to ask say, lefty, you should have told me that ahead of time because I got one lefty head.
Yeah, I know,
here.
I know.
Yeah.
And what's really kind of funny about this is I've known that this was coming for maybe the last, I'd probably say 8 months. And you see on all the forums and websites, when are you making a tour lefty? When are you going to make a tour lefty?
Yeah.
And to be able to keep this a secret as long as we have, we're really excited to announce that we're bringing in the tours in a way that the left-handed golfer can play them.
Okay. Where are we going next here?
Next, let's go to wedges.
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 You know, that's,
Wedges are my favorite
Oh, I know.
Mizuno product.
Oh, I know. You know, and I think that's something we're
And
very
I
underrated
love this
in.
one.
It's a phenomenal wedge. You know, we're one of the only companies that is doing a fully forged wedge on the marketplace. There's plenty
this
of them
price.
at this price point.
At this price,
with a
you are
tour issue
alone.
shaft stack,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
no way.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a lot of wedge technologies we've brought to the market that now are industry standards. You know, Mizuno was the first to bring in loft-specific grinds, loft-specific grooves, loft-specific center of gravities. Those are now industry standards in everybody's clubs, but we just don't get the credit for it.
Yeah,
Just like a
yeah.
lot of things Mizuno does. We'll bring it to the market, and then slowly you see it become a standard.
I love your stuff so much that you don't have a wedge fitting kit.
Not yet.
So I built my own. I sent these off to China. They
Mm-hmm.
were threaded, and I've got probably 20 or 30
Yep.
wedge shafts. So if you want a KBS high rev, you want a KBS 610, you want any one of the Dynamic Golds, you want a Project X, or you want the shafts that match the rest of your set, like a C-Taper X-Flex.
Correct.
Right? I can fit you with those, and then we can take these and we can gap, we can look at your gapping through the set.
Absolutely.
And if you want me to do something like taking the back of it off, I'll grind them, right? And so I put one in here with and without a grind, so we can experiment with different things.
Oh yeah, and being a soft forge, being that 1025 mild carbon steel with an additional boron, makes it to where you can make these as customizable as you want.
Yeah,
They're very malleable to bend for changing the lofts, changing the lie, or even just changing the grind of the sole.
And this one may look a little beat up, but it's
raw.
It's raw.
This is the
right?
first time we brought raw to the market in a long, long time. And it started off as being just a sand and lob option, so 54 to 62. And the demand that we got forced us to bring them in the pitch and gap as well.
Yeah. So I've got satin.
Yep.
And I know satin because the T20 is black.
Correct.
Right? And the raw, it's not paint filled.
Correct.
And then for those people that want to put a little pizzazz in their bag, we've got blue.
Mizuno blue is one of the best blues in the marketplace.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the great things about these wedges I really, really like is the fact that all of these badges are customizable as well. So if you're somebody who, instead of being a 5614, they need a 5513 so they like to bend it strong, well, your club is going to say 5513.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
That's one of the few things that Mizuno likes to do, because I'm one of those people, when I have it on my bag, if it doesn't say 56, and I know it's a 56, I will stamp it myself to say it. I'm just one of those weird golfers that has to say the right loft. So for us to put all the right lofts and bounces for what you ordered is something that's very unique to Mizuno.
It's a little different for me because I take them out and I hit them, and I want to hit a yardage.
Correct.
Right? And of course, I have my own bending machine in my own shop, so I just kind of come home, and I move it a little this way or a little that way until that yardage is going to be there on the course for me. So when I pull that club out, I know this one is going 85 yards.
Absolutely. You know what's really cool too is, with the Mizuno shaft optimizer that we brought out a new one a couple years ago. We're continuing to update it. One of the best features on that is now we can do wedge gapping. If we know your attack angles, we know your tempo, we know your club head speed, we have a decent idea of how far you're going to hit your wedges. The question I think now most people ask when they're getting fit for wedges is they always ask, what degree and bounces do you play? What degree and bounce do you prefer? Where now the conversation starts with, how far do you want to hit your gap wedge? How far do you want to hit your sand wedge? And they say, I want to hit my sand wedge 86 yards.
Right.
Well, great. A 56-10 is going to get you to 86. So we're able to get you to within a yards now. It's a great little feature that we have in the new shaft optimizer.
I haven't used that. But, this particular grind, I call this Texas sand.
Okay.
Because Texas sand is heavy.
Absolutely it is.
And if it's wet, it's like concrete.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And if you want to get into Texas sand, if you play early in the morning, right, you can't get in Texas sand with that much sole width.
Oh, no.
Right?
Way too dense.
Yeah. So you don't know how many people I've put in this, what I call my Texas sand wedge.
I've been curious about that grind. I might have to bring my wedge over to see what you can do with it.
I actually have a pilot that I work with. He carries two wedges. He carries a conventional grind, and he carries this, and depending upon what state he's in and what the state of the sand is in the state he's in, right, he puts a different wedge in the bag for that day.
Oh, yeah.
He puts in hard sand or he puts in soft sand.
You know what? And that's as people who travel a lot in the golf, people don't realize, each state you're in, depending on the wind and the climate, the sand is completely different.
Yeah.
Before here, I lived in Georgia. We had very soft, fluffy sand that you could get under very easily.
You're not getting under it over here.
No.
It's
like
hitting concrete, right?
Literally.
Bam! You have to fire into it.
You do, and it took me probably 3 to 4 rounds to get used to hitting out of the sand because it's just so dense. I can't tell you how many I would just blade because I couldn't get through it.
Yeah. Well, you need to bring your wedges over.
I might need to, absolutely.
Put a little rust grind on it.
It's definitely not me not practicing ever. It's definitely the wedge's fault.
Yeah, I get it.
But yeah,
so we've got a new wedge.
We do. So the ES21. You know, this was a wedge that really came out of left field from Mizuno. This is one that we're making. It's a hollow body construction wedge.
We actually have one here.
We do. We do have
Yeah.
a broken up piece of it right here. And if you notice, the club inside is hollow.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we did that was the sweet spot on a wedge sits about right here. With the amount of mass we have in the hosel and in the club head shaft being here, the sweet spot sits about right there. With this being hollow construction, we moved the sweet spot 10 millimeters over. So now we have a perfectly centered sweet spot. Another thing that we did was because this is hollow, we actually tilted the Z-axis of this club. Being if we're talking about
Gotcha.
clubs in
Yeah,
three
yeah.
dimensions,
Yeah, I understand.
there's
Yeah.
three axes, X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z.
Right.
The Z-axis, since we have it going diagonally, most mishits are low heel, high toe.
Exactly.
So if we
Yeah.
can keep all of the impacts under that Z-axis, under that sweet spot, we're going to get higher, more consistent spin overall. This is not a wedge that's going to be for a guy who I don't want to pigeonhole this wedge for just a guy who needs more help getting more spin on a wedge.
Well, you know, I played the S series for a very, very long
Absolutely.
time. Yeah? And I missed it when it went away.
Yeah.
Because I liked that fact that it was basically a cavity-backed wedge.
Yes, exactly.
Right? It was toe heel.
Yeah.
It was forgiving. I sold a lot of S's.
You know, and those wedges, they're designed just for anybody who needs more spin, more consistency. And that's not a negative thing, especially in the wedge category where feel, touch, and consistency is the most important part of the game.
And for the average recreational golfer, I've found that when I take him into the Mizuno 105 Modus wedge shaft, that they're not struggling as much with all of that weight.
Absolutely not.
That lightweight shaft, is that a standard? Or do I just order them all that
You
way?
order them that way. So in the T series, we're having the Tour Issues Dynamic Gold S400s.
Okay.
And this
130
wedge,
grams.
Correct. In
Yeah.
this wedge, you're going to see the KBS Tour High Rev is going to be
Okay.
the stock option, which is 115 grams. It's going to be a little bit lighter weight.
Yeah,
going to be
yeah.
similar to what you were trying to do in the sense of giving a little bit. The club doesn't swing them. It's
Yeah.
going to be more consistency, and they're going to have a lot better.
But still have the option of ordering the 105s.
Correct. Absolutely. You know,
yeah.
Mizuno still leads the industries in the most shafts that we offer at no upcharge. And there's a multitude of shafts that we're going to be able to put in these clubs at no upcharge. So if you play a KBS Tour stiff, hypothetically, we can put this in the wedge, and it's not going to cost you any extra to do that.
Right, yeah. You know, and I do that for the better players. For the recreational golfers, it's at 105 all day long.
It's a phenomenal shaft. It really
Yeah,
is.
Yeah. Well, Rich, I think we've pretty much covered it.
I think so.
So, thank you.
I really appreciate it.
For
Russ.
those of you that enjoyed this video, there's a subscribe button down there. Hit that. Give me a like so that Google knows that you appreciate what I do.
Russ, I appreciate your time.
Okay. We're going to have another one of these where we talk about the shafts.
Yep.
And you've got a few more surprises coming
Stay
a
tuned.
little bit later in the season.
Absolutely.
So
Stay
stay
tuned.
tuned. We've got more of these coming. Thanks for spending your time with us.